You don't notice the cracks at first. Not when you've lived in the same house for 15 years and shared a bed with the same woman every night. Cracks start as silence. A second glance. A missed kiss on the cheek before work. The sound of her voice losing that softness it used to carry when she said your name. It all builds slowly, like rust behind the drywall. You don't see it until the wall caves in. My name's John Mason. I'm 45 years old, and I work as a mechanic in a small auto shop on the edge of town. Not much to it. Wrenches, grease, loud radios, and honest work. I've always believed in keeping things simple. Show up, do your job, be good to people, go home to what matters. For a long time, what mattered was Carol. Carol and I met in our 20s. She cut hair at the salon next to my shop, and I'd come in for a trim every couple of weeks just to see her smile. We started dating, got married, bought a modest one-story house that needed more work than we had money for, and made it into a home. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. She used to say she liked my steadiness, that it made her feel safe. But something changed over the last year. The compliments stopped. Then the conversation got thinner. Then came the eye rolls, the sighs, the half-jokes about how boring things had become, how I wore the same boots every day, how we hadn't taken a trip in years. I'd nod and let it pass. I thought maybe she was just going through something. Looking back, I think I was the only one still trying. Then came Troy. He lived 2 houses down. Tall, good-looking in a messy kind of way. Worked delivery for some furniture company. Always home at odd hours. Carol said he was just friendly when I noticed how much time she spent talking to him over the fence. I didn't push. I didn't accuse. That's not my style. I kept my eyes open, paid attention. The first real sign was the phone. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter while cooking. Now it never left her hand. Locked tighter than Fort Knox. Notifications turned off. She smiled more when it buzzed than when I walked into the room. That was when I started getting quiet inside. I'm not a jealous man, but I'm not stupid either. One Friday night, I came home early from the shop. Carol wasn't there. Her car was gone, but she hadn't said anything about going out. I waited. 10 minutes. 30. An hour. Then I looked out the window and saw it. Troy's pickup pulling into his driveway. Carol in the passenger seat. They didn't see me. They were laughing. And when she got out, he touched her back in a way no friendly neighbor should. Still, I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just waited. That Sunday, over breakfast, she told me we needed to talk. I think we've outgrown each other, she said, not meeting my eyes. We've been on autopilot for too long. I want something more. Something exciting. I nodded. Took a sip of my coffee. Is that why you've been spending so much time with Troy? Her eyes flicked up, wide for just a second, then cold. Don't make this ugly, John. I'm trying to be honest with you. Right, I said. Honest. She went on to say she didn't want to fight, just a clean break. She thought it would be best if she stayed in the house, at least for a while, until she figured things out. You can get a place closer to work, she offered, like it was some kind of favor. I nodded again. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her what I knew. I didn't tell her the house had never legally been mine. See, years ago when we bought the place, my credit was still recovering from a mess in my early 20s. My sister, Mary, had stepped in and signed the deed in her name. We always planned to transfer it later, but we never got around to it. The mortgage came out of my account. I did the repairs, painted the porch, fixed the roof. But on paper, it was never mine. And I never told Carol that. So when she said she'd be staying, when she started acting like this place was hers now, like I'd be the one packing a bag and figuring out where to sleep, well, I just let her keep talking. There's a kind of power in silence, especially when you're the only one in the room who knows the truth. That night, I called Mary, told her what was happening. She didn't hesitate. Whatever you need, she said. Over the next few days, I made quiet moves. Transferred some savings. Talked to a lawyer. Got a few things in order. Carol was too busy texting and planning her new life to notice. I think she thought I'd go quietly, bitter and broken, maybe crash on a buddy's couch while she lived in my house with Troy. She had no idea what was coming. And I had no intention of warning her. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's legal. It's calm. It's the moment she realizes she burned the only bridge that was holding her up, and you didn't even flinch. I was done being the boring one, the steady one, the fool. Now I was just done. After that Sunday morning talk, Carol acted like everything had been settled, like the divorce was a done deal and the next phase of her life had begun. She started moving around the house differently, walking barefoot across the floors like they were hers alone, playing music from her phone without asking, even changing the curtains in the living room like she was marking her new territory. I let her. I didn't protest. She thought my silence meant acceptance, maybe even regret. But I wasn't defeated. I was just planning. First thing Monday, I called Mary again. She was already expecting the follow-up. "You sure you're ready?" she asked. "Because once we move, we move." I told her I was sure. More than sure. She drove down that same day and brought the folder, property documents, deed copies, a notarized statement from the original purchase, everything we'd need to remind the world, legally and officially, that the house belonged to her. And she wasn't going to let someone who walked out on her brother treat it like a hotel. Over the next few days, I started preparing my quiet exit. I rented a small one-bedroom place near the shop. Nothing fancy, but it was clean, affordable, and most importantly, mine. I didn't tell Carol. I just started packing little things she wouldn't notice were gone. Tools, jackets, paperwork, my father's old watch. She was too busy texting on the couch, headphones in, laughing at videos I wasn't invited to see. I watched her once, eyes glued to her phone, and I thought, this woman used to look at me like I was the only thing in the room. Now she doesn't even flinch when I leave it. I made a list of what I'd take and what I'd leave. The couch? Hers. The TV? Take it. I don't care. The old toolbox my dad gave me when I started apprenticing? That was coming with me, no matter what. There's something liberating about choosing what to let go of. I didn't want to carry the weight of things that didn't mean anything anymore. I just wanted to leave with my dignity, my peace, and a clean start. On Thursday, I met with the lawyer Mary recommended. A smart guy in his 50s with gray hair and a voice that didn't waste time. I explained everything. How the house was in Mary's name. How Carol had walked out emotionally long before she ever said the words. He nodded slowly. "This won't be messy," he said. "It's clear-cut, but you need to act soon, before she tries to make this messier than it needs to be." We filed the paperwork that afternoon. Mary would be serving a formal notice to vacate by the following Monday. Back at home, Carol was glowing. She had no idea. She was wearing new clothes I hadn't seen before, lighter makeup, straighter posture. Like shedding me had somehow brought her back to life. I didn't say anything when she casually dropped Troy's name into conversation, acting like it didn't sting. I just smiled. "Sounds like you're doing well," I said. "Really happy for you." That seemed to confuse her for a second. She tilted her head like she expected sarcasm. There was none, just honesty, and it unsettled her more than anger ever could. That night, I quietly took down the photo of us from the hallway. The one from our 10th anniversary, up in the mountains, before the tiredness set in. I wrapped it in newspaper, placed it in a small box, and took it out to the truck. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't even look up. I slept lighter after that. By Saturday, I had cleared out most of my things. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, I was gone in spirit, if not yet in name. The only thing left was the house, and the truth she hadn't figured out yet. On Sunday, Mary came over. It wasn't a surprise visit. Carol knew she was coming. I told her my sister wanted to check on the gutters before fall really kicked in. Carol barely acknowledged her, which was a mistake. Mary doesn't take well to being ignored, especially not by someone who thinks she's owed something. They barely spoke. Mary stayed out front with me, sipping coffee and going over the final draft of the letter. "She'll flip," Mary said. "But that's not your problem anymore." Monday morning, the letter was hand-delivered. Mary had it served officially, with a copy to the lawyer. The language was polite but firm. Due to the change in household circumstances, the current occupant, Carol, was required to vacate the premises within 30 days. No exceptions. No negotiation. It was legal, binding, and fully enforceable. I came home that night to silence. Carol was in the kitchen, staring at the letter on the table. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I just walked past her, picked up the last box I had packed, and headed back out to the truck. "John," she finally said, her voice thinner than I'd heard in years. "What is this?" I paused at the door. "It's the part you didn't know," I said. "The house was never mine to give. You assumed it was. But it's not. And now, it's time to go." Her face changed. Anger, confusion, betrayal, all flashing at once. But I didn't stick around for the rest. I closed the door gently behind me and drove to my new place. The sun was setting, the sky fading into that dusty orange that always reminded me of long drives and fresh air. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely. It was clean, like wiping down a workbench after years of clutter. I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of my new bed, and smiled. This was just the beginning. Tuesday morning, I got a call from the shop before I even had my boots on. The water heater had gone out. I told them I'd be there in 20, threw on a hoodie, and left my phone on the kitchen counter, deliberately. When I came home after lunch, I had 8 missed calls and 4 texts from Carol. The last one just said, "We need to talk. Urgent." I didn't respond. That afternoon, I went by Mary's office. She'd just gotten off the phone with our attorney. "She's mad," she said, barely hiding her amusement. "Tried telling the lawyer this house was hers in spirit. Whatever that means." She handed me a sealed envelope. "This is your copy, just in case she tries anything." I nodded and slid it into my glove box. By Wednesday, the silence from Carol turned into noise. She was at the house when I stopped by to grab my last toolbox from the shed. As soon as I stepped into the yard, she came out the back door in a flurry. "You can't just do this," she snapped. "I've lived here for over a decade, John. I made this house a home." I leaned against the fence post, looked her square in the eye. "That's exactly the problem, Carol. You assumed you were entitled to something that was never yours. But we were married." "Yeah, we were. Until you decided I wasn't exciting enough and started sneaking around with Troy." Her mouth opened like she had something ready, some polished excuse, but nothing came out. "I didn't blow up. I didn't throw you out. I gave you what you said you wanted. Freedom. But that doesn't mean you get to stay in a house that was never yours. You just didn't ask the right questions." She stared at me, stunned. Then the fury came back. "You're being petty." I laughed, not unkindly. "No. Petty would have been changing the locks while you were at work. Petty would have been blasting the photos I have of you and Troy all over town. This is calm. This is measured." She folded her arms. "I'll fight it." "You can try," I said, getting into my truck. "But you'll lose." As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of her in the side mirror. Still standing there. Not chasing after me, not apologizing. Just staring like she couldn't believe this was really happening. It was. 2 days later, word started to get around. I hadn't said a thing to anyone, but in small towns, the wind talks. A guy at the gas station gave me that slow nod of sympathy and respect. Another dropped off his truck at the shop and said, "Heard things got messy. You handled it right." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Troy, for his part, suddenly stopped being visible. No more barbecues in the front yard. No more leaning over fences talking loud enough for me to hear. Carol was still in the house, but the sparkle in her eyes had dimmed. She looked older, angrier, like someone who had just realized she had overplayed her hand. By the end of the week, I got word through a mutual friend that Troy had moved out of his place and gone to stay with his brother in another county. Apparently, he hadn't signed up for all the drama. Carol was left standing in a house she didn't own, with no backup plan and fewer allies by the day. I spent that Saturday cleaning my new apartment. It wasn't much, just a quiet spot with a good view of the highway and a decent kitchen. But it was peaceful. No eggshells to walk on. No sideways glances. No lies. Late that night, I got one last message from her. "Can we talk? I think we both acted out of emotion. Maybe we should try again, start fresh. You know we had good years." I stared at the screen for a long time. I thought about our 10th anniversary trip, the way she used to sing while cooking, the comfort of familiar routines. But then I remembered the coldness. The way she looked at her phone more than she looked at me. The smirk she gave when she talked about living again. The way she planned to push me out of my own home without asking a single question. I deleted the message. No reply. Some good years don't mean the future has to look the same. Some homes were never meant to be shared forever. And some silences are louder than any answer. I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and let the quiet hold me. The following week passed like a slow leak in a tire. Quiet, steady, and inevitable. Carol didn't leave the house, not for days. Not to go to work, not to visit friends. I knew because I drove by on the way to the shop every morning and the blinds were always half drawn. That house, the one she fought so hard to claim, now looked like a fortress built on sand. The lights were still on, but there was no warmth in the windows. At the shop, things got busier. Fall always brought in last-minute tune-ups before winter rolled in, but I noticed I was smiling more. Sleeping better. My shoulders sat lower, like I'd put down a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. Guys at work started asking if I'd met someone new. I hadn't, but I was meeting myself again. And for now, that was enough. One morning, my buddy Rick stopped by the shop for a tire patch. We've known each other since high school. He leaned on the counter, arms crossed, giving me a look. "You hear what Carol's telling people?" he asked. I wiped my hands on a rag and shrugged. "Does it matter? She's saying you blindsided her. That you kicked her out of her own home." He raised an eyebrow. "She's leaving out the part where she moved on with Troy before she moved out of your heart." I gave a tired smile. "Let her talk." He nodded. "That's what I figured you'd say. Still, folks know the truth. Nobody's buying her version. Small towns don't run on facts. They run on patterns. And people had seen enough over the years to put two and two together. Carol might have tried to paint me as bitter or cold, but the real story was out in the way she held herself now. Defensive. Alone. She'd counted on everyone being on her side, but she'd underestimated how much people respect quiet strength. Later that week, I stopped by the house for the last time. Not to talk, just to take a few tools I'd left in the shed. As I stepped onto the back porch, the door creaked open and there she was. Hair undone, barefoot, arms crossed. "You win," she said flatly. "I wasn't playing," I replied. "You always have to be so damn calm, don't you?" she said, stepping onto the porch. "You think that makes you better than everyone? Just because you didn't yell? Because you handled it like a saint?" "No," I said. "It just means I didn't want to waste any more of myself on someone who stopped seeing me." She opened her mouth, but closed it again. There was nothing left to say. She looked tired, not the kind that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from realizing you'd bet everything on the wrong hand. I picked up the toolbox, nodded once, and stepped back down the steps. "You know," she called after me, "Troy was never really what I wanted. I felt trapped." I stopped, turned slowly. "No one trapped you, Carol. You climbed into that cage yourself." Then I walked away for the last time. That night, Mary called. The lawyer had confirmed Carol signed the acknowledgement papers. She had to vacate the house within 10 days. No loopholes. No stall tactics. I thanked her, then sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above me. This wasn't how I thought my life would go. I didn't get married thinking we'd fall apart. I didn't work hard every day so I could end up alone in a one-bedroom apartment. But I also didn't expect betrayal to teach me how much I could endure without losing my soul. And that mattered. The next few days were a blur. Someone told me Carol showed up at the salon trying to get her old job back. They weren't hiring. Troy was gone, moved in with someone new in a different county. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Some things speak for themselves. On a quiet Sunday morning, I drove past the house one more time. A moving van was in the driveway. Carol stood on the porch, arms folded, talking to two movers. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just couldn't bring herself to look. Either way, I kept driving. That chapter was closed. But the story wasn't over yet. It's funny how quiet the world gets after chaos leaves your life. Not just the kind of quiet you hear. It's in your bones, in your mornings, in the way coffee tastes when you're not swallowing it to keep from screaming. After Carol left the house for good, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a room that had been too loud for too long was finally at peace. I spent the first few days after her move packing away the remnants she left behind. Some receipts in a drawer, a bottle of half-used shampoo in the shower, a chipped mug that said #OneWife in faded gold letters. I could have thrown it all away in anger, but I didn't. I set it in a box, sealed it, and left it on the porch. She never came back for it. Mary stopped by the apartment that Thursday. She brought a pie, apple, her specialty, and a fresh copy of the signed legal release. "You're clear," she said, setting it gently on the counter. "She can't touch the house. She's officially out." I even double-checked the county records. Everything's squared away. I nodded and poured her a cup of coffee. "Thanks, Mary. For everything." She smiled. "You handled it better than I would have." I looked out the window, where a breeze was lifting the leaves off the sidewalk. I didn't want revenge. Just truth. "You got it," she said. Later that night, I sat on the porch of my small rental with the pie tin on my lap, spooning bite after bite in the dark. There was a dog barking in the distance, someone's TV muffled through the wall, but it all felt far away, detached, like I was sitting at the end of something long and bruising, and the road ahead was finally mine again. A few days later, Rick came by the shop with his son. They were picking up a repaired axle. He leaned in while the kid checked out the lift system. Heard Carol's staying with her sister now, he said. I shrugged. That's so. Yup. Troy ghosted her completely. Left her with some unpaid bills too. She tried calling around, seeing if folks could help her out, but nobody's biting. I'm not surprised, I said. Rick paused. You think she regrets it? I took a breath, wiped my hands, and said, regret only matters if you learn from it. Otherwise, it's just decoration. He grinned. That's cold, man. No, that's honest. The weekend rolled in quiet. I went to the farmer's market, picked up some new tools from a supply sale, and took a long drive out past the ridge. It had been years since I'd just driven without needing to get somewhere. I passed old diners, gas stations, fields beginning to turn gold with the season. I stopped at a roadside stand and bought a little wooden carving of a truck. Don't know why, just felt like it meant something. When I got back to town, I parked outside the old house one last time. Not to stir up anything, just to look. The blinds were open. Empty walls inside. For the first time, it didn't look like a place I'd lost. It looked like a place I'd outgrown. I sat there a moment longer, then pulled away. Back home, I cleaned up the kitchen, put on a record. Yes, a real record. And sat with a beer and the kind of silence that doesn't echo. Carol never sent another message. There was nothing left to say. Whatever life was waiting for me now, I'd meet it head on. Alone maybe, but whole and free. A few weeks after everything settled, I bought myself a used pickup. Midnight blue, just a few scuffs on the bumper. Engine clean enough to eat off. Nothing flashy, but it ran smooth, had good bones, and it was mine. I hadn't bought anything for myself in a long time. Not really. Not without second-guessing how Carol would feel about it, or whether it fit the image she had in her head of the life we were supposed to be living. This truck didn't care about any of that. It just started when I turned the key and took me wherever I wanted to go, which, on that first Sunday with no obligations, was down a two-lane road outside of town with nothing on either side but faded barns and wheat fields. I had the windows down. A new dog, half shepherd, half who knows what, sat in the passenger seat. I named him Diesel. Found him at a shelter 2 towns over. He doesn't talk back, doesn't judge, just sticks his head out the window and lets the wind tell him secrets. I'd spent years being a husband, a provider, a forgiver, and I don't regret those years. No use rewriting history. But I'd also learned the difference between loyalty and self-sacrifice, between keeping the peace and letting someone walk all over you. I gave Carol the benefit of the doubt for too long. Gave her quiet space, believing she'd find her way back. Instead, she used it to drift farther away. People in town still talk sometimes. I hear little bits now and then. Carol tried to start some online boutique, but it fizzled out. She moved into a small condo near her sister's place, mostly keeps to herself. Troy disappeared from the map. No one really knows what happened to him. Last I heard, he was selling used boats in Florida. Funny how fast flashy guys run when there's no applause left to chase. But I don't think about them much. They're background noise now. I got a call last week from the shop owner across the highway. Wants to retire soon and offered to sell me his place at a fair price. I told him I'd think about it. I don't need to be the boss again. But maybe it's time I stop fixing other people's engines and build something that's fully mine. Some nights, I still remember the sound of that kitchen clock back in the old house. The one Carol picked out because it was modern but homey. I hated that clock. It ticked too loud, like it was trying to prove time was still moving even when everything between us had stopped. Now I've got a quiet wall, no ticking, and I don't miss it. Diesel barks at squirrels sometimes, chases his tail, falls asleep in a tight circle by the couch. He's a good reminder that life doesn't have to be complicated to be full. Last Sunday, I drove the pickup out past the ridge, same as always. Parked at the overlook and watched the sunset stretch across the hills like melted copper. Didn't think about the past. Didn't worry about the future. Just sat there with the windows down, the wind brushing through my fingers like an old friend. Peace isn't something that shows up with a bang. It's quiet. It's slow. It comes when you finally stop arguing with what already happened and start living with what's next. That's where I am now. Not angry. Not broken. Just free.